Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. We're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Wednesday. It is June the 19th. That makes it Juneteenth. That makes it a fake new federal holiday implemented by Joe Biden. Why would he do such a thing? Why would he celebrate such a weird day? And by the way, I'm going to do just a quick touch on why Juneteenth is silly. Juneteenth celebrates the freeing of the slaves who were already declared free when Union generals made it to Galveston, Texas, something like 2 or 3 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. It's a pandering holiday. It's totally made up. You want to celebrate something? How about the Emancipation Proclamation? But Juneteenth is a celebration that happens because it's in the middle of June. It's the summer. And apparently they wanted to make it something that touched out to people in the South. I don't get it. Seems like it inspires a lot of mass shootings and mass stupidity, even including places here in Austin, Texas, or Round Rock, Texas, just down the street from me. Now my wife is asking me, hey, should we really be going to parks right now if people are shooting each other? I guess we'll just have to see. I don't want to get involved in a shooting, but I'm always armed and ready, and you should be too because the world is uncertain. We're going to get into a bunch of weird stuff, and specifically we're going to talk about not shootings by rival gangs or the gangsters that exist in the world. They're a different kind of gangster than they were back in the day. We're going to be talking about governments and gangsters. But I repeat myself, do I not? Kash Patel, who I consider a friend, someone I've shared beers with, someone who I am regularly in contact with and have friendly conversations. Kash Patel wrote a book called Government Gangsters. It's a great name, and it sits in my head regularly. I think about it. But whenever I hear the term gangsters, I think of the 1930s. You know, they've got the fedora, they've got the overcoat, they've got the Tommy gun, the Thompson submachine gun, that iconic, 45 ACP with a drum mag or a stick coming out of there. They've got machine guns, don't they? And so that made me start thinking, we had a bump stock decision. We have some people that are very, very incensed by the fact that Americans are allowed to have bump stocks. And based on the language we talked about yesterday, they have actually cleared the way for perfectly legitimate use of things like force reset triggers and binary triggers. If you're not a gun person, this is all going to skip past your head, but I'll make it make some sense for you. I start thinking about governments and gangsters and government gangsters and gangsters specifically. And so today's thumbnail, you'll see if you are watching us on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin, which I highly recommend you go do. Make sure you've liked this video by the time you're done. Make sure you have subscribed to our channel and that you are getting notified when we go live, which is at 0930 Eastern time. That's 8:30 here in Texas, America. You can see the chat is moving along. Listen, the thing that it made me think about was the Dillinger Gang, which is always hyped up. In fact, they talk about this sort of iconic FBI history when you're at the FBI Academy at Quantico, which is something I did in 2016, also in June, by the way. Coming up on that, my little anniversary of service with the Bureau that is no longer there. They talk about gangsters, and so you've got that sort of, Tommy gun toting image in your head. A guy who says, "See here, we're gonna go do this thing here," and they talk like this, and they shoot recklessly from the hip. But why can't we own those machine guns anymore? And why is it the government that's the only ones to do it? I want to go kind of back in time, and we're going to do the analysis of the advent of tyranny. When I tell you that this election in 2024, it's a big deal, and there's no doubt about it. But this election in 2024 is not going to be the end-all be-all because we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to solve this problem overnight. And so for anyone to think that there's just by simple election of Donald Trump, the problems will be solved. I think you're foolish. And I don't think you're being serious with yourself. The government gangsters took a very long walk to get to this corrupted republic, which may not even be close to what we actually thought it was, and probably hasn't been for my entire life. In fact, almost everybody that is alive on the planet right now doesn't actually remember the America the way America was designed. I'm going to show you that I think the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment in 1913 were the beginning of the end of the Golden Republic of the United States. There are some additional dates that are relevant. 1934 and 1935 come to mind. So we're going to talk about those. And yes, machine guns is going to play into it. And then lastly, we're going to get to 1968, which was a gun control act. This was also an advent of really blatant racism entering the game when the government decided to pick winners and losers. And then we're going to talk about 1984 and 1986, which many of you who are about my age or a little bit older remember thinking, yeah, that was the golden age. It was the 80s. Maybe you thought it was the 70s. There was some good music. There were some good protests against the government. People were starting to wake up a little bit. People saw Watergate and started asking those questions. I think it goes back to the 19-teens. I think we've been living, as someone said, under the police state our entire lives, and it's just been slowly getting worse. 1946 is another good date in there. So we're going to track the advent of losing ground to governments and gangsters, or are those the same thing? People who are not gangsters, my friends over at Catholic Vote. In fact, they're like really devout Catholic good people, and they care about this country desperately. We do a show called Between the Lines that will be released tomorrow in the afternoon. You guys can find it on rumble.com/Catholic Vote. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can find it on youtube.com/@Catholic Vote. And I think you can leave the @ out too as well. But they've got a great channel over there, over 100,000 subscribers. You should be one as well if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are on Rumble, let's get them over the notch. Let's get that channel a few viewers. They make great content. They do a lot of good work with us, and they are doing Between the Lines with Kyle Seraphin, which is something I really think is kind of like a passion project for me. Me and our producer Scott do a great job putting together some real salient thoughts that you can hand out to people. And if you're not getting the loop, you're failing. The first story in the loop is going to be our first story for today. So make sure you're going to catholicvote.org/loop. All of those things have been promoted to you now. Now you know what to do. All right, let's get deep into the weeds. I'm going to do some news stories first because they're relevant and they're going to show some gangsterism. And yes, that is a real word, gangsterism. I had to go look it up. It is defined by multiple dictionaries as a culture belonging to organized gangs, especially violent criminal gangs. And doesn't that sound a lot like what our government is involved in at this point? So our first story, I'm debating, I guess we'll show you the article and then we'll talk about the article. Then we can talk a little bit about the video that went viral yesterday. And it is a video that is of major concern for me. Continues to be. Because why did these guys do this? I'm going to give you a reflection from looking at them based on age, based on a little bit of background information we got from our inside sources. And it's not good. People. Christopher Rufo released this piece at City Journal the other day. This comes out dated yesterday, the 18th. The murky business of transgender medicine. Did Texas Children's Hospital commit fraud to pay for children's sex change procedures? So there's a big issue here. The question of what is a whistleblower is always it's always something that I like to adjudicate. When you talk about federal whistleblowers, it's a little different than when we talk about people in private industry. If you work in the medical industry, for example, you have a different standard of what it is to be a whistleblower than if you work for the federal government like me and Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend and George Hill, who we're going to cover their stories a little bit today too, because there was a hit piece on them that had to get redacted and retracted. Chris Rufo does a good job covering on transgender medicine. This is the story of the whistleblower, and we're going to use that word accurately, who brought to the attention people in government the possible misuse of government funds under the Medicaid and Medicare programs. I think it's Medicaid specifically that we're talking about here. That is given by the federal government to the states, and then the states has the ability to do what they will with that money to help those who are indigent. Our whistleblower friend here, that's Dr. Eitan Himes, who's been on this program, and he will be again, I'm sure, was harassed. He was recently indicted with 4 counts of violation of HIPAA, which is an absolute BS waste of the FBI's time. It is a political hit job in the same way that they are using the FACE Act, which you should be concerned about. When they are weaponizing federal law, that is what I would call gangsterism. They are working within a system, but they are using it for ways that it was not intended. Just like you can own a firearm lawfully, but if you use it to threaten and coerce and kill people in order to make money illegally, isn't that a problem? So you guys can support Dr. Atam Heim if you go to my social media feeds. I'll put it out on Truth Social as well, but it was on Twitter yesterday. I shared his Give, Send, Go. They've raised $600,000 to go out there and fight this. I expect it will take every bit of that. His lawsuit has already been ongoing for a while. He's had an attorney that has been working for him for quite a while. The problem is this. The FBI obviously did not just an investigation where they took some information, and then they ran out there and didn't interview witnesses or intimidate other people into talking about it. And so there's a video that went out yesterday of two FBI agents, and we have it on pretty good authority based on what's being reported by Chris Rufo and folks who said that these guys did work in Dallas, one of whom is retired, Paul Nixon and David McBride. Now, if you're a former FBI agent or retired FBI agent, you listen to this program, I would encourage you to reach out to those men and find out that what I'm saying is likely true, and you also know that it's likely true. The odds of these men being true believers in the cause of going after a doctor for violations of HIPAA, of all the bullshit things you could waste the FBI's time with, is very low. And there's been said as much by people who I don't always agree with. There's a guy named FX Reagan who's on Twitter. He's a retired agent. Now he's a novelist, much like John Nance, my former supervisor. And the two of them generally agree on things, and they generally defend the Bureau. But what they're starting to realize, specifically FX is starting to realize, is this is not the Bureau that they retired from. It's not the Bureau that did this. It's not the guys that were shooting machine guns at the range. It's not the guys that worked under Hoover, for better or for worse. And we got a kind of a good picture of that under Mike Waller. So if you want to know a little bit about FBI history and things that are far deeper than my knowledge, you can read Big Intel, which is written by Mike Waller. Or you can watch our program where we interviewed him, or you could do both. That would actually be the best. I got a copy of Big Intel over on the shelf there, and I put a little blurb on it. It's a very good read, by the way. It's very interesting because the story is compelling. But how did they get captured by this woke ideology where they are now defending transgender medicine clinics that are outlawed by Texas law? The FBI is now defending the federal position on transgender medicine despite the fact that the state doesn't actually allow for its facilities to be charged. So Atam Heim is a whistleblower in so much as he reported wrongdoing, possible misuse of federal funds and state funds out of these programs for the indigent. And he did so by doing an actual investigation. He went there and he requested, the indictment is actually for him unlawfully accessing patient records. That's what they claim. Here's the real problem. The hospital actually determined that he had authorization because they gave him authorization. He didn't do so fraudulently, although that's what they're trying to claim. He said, I'm a doctor, I'm this thing. They could look up and know that he's a doctor. They can see his list of patients when they approved him, and they approved him to have access to the things that he did. Now, why did he do that? Because he saw 5 rotations at this transgender medical clinic at the hospital and thought that they were problematic and thought they were a violation of both state law and that they were a violation of the Hippocratic Oath. You guys can read more about his story at City Journal. I highly recommend it. What I want to show you is what happens when the FBI knocks on your door because you are part of one of these investigations. And I will encourage you, let me just do this right here full screen. If someone from the FBI comes and knocks on your door, you should not talk to them. I will not talk to them. But here's the real problem. You're going to fight every human instinct to be polite, to straighten this out, to just tell them what they want to know so that they'll go away. And I'm going to encourage you to do the opposite of this. You're going to have a pit in your stomach when someone shows you FBI credentials because all of the mind that you have is going to say, oh my God, what has happened? What have I done? What are they here for? I haven't done anything wrong. What could they possibly be here to do? We talked yesterday about Gavin DeBecker and the gift of fear, that intuition. That fear is something you should listen to. You can answer the door. You can ask for a business card, then close the door and contact an attorney. The end. Now, I also mentioned I have a no soliciting sign outside of my house. And so if the FBI shows at my house, I'd be like, look, you doesn't look like you're here to serve a search warrant and we're not buying whatever bullshit you're selling. So F off, get out of here. You could be that. There's no reason to be particularly impolite to the FBI agents that show up because they probably don't believe in what they're doing anyway. I'm going to show you this guy. He's too old to have been captured by the woke nonsense, but he's also too old to have said no. And this is what the ordinary men of the FBI look like right now, folks. This is what ordinary men are. Who are the ordinary men? They are the people that actually made the Holocaust happen. How'd they do it? They just said yes when they should have started throwing the BS flag and asking questions. They said, well, it's just going and getting a list of names from all the people that live in this building. Well, we're just kicking them out of their houses and putting them into a central area because the state needs to keep an eye on them. Well, we're just going to make them wear these arm patches because if they don't, we won't know who they are when they leave the ghettos. We're just going to push them into these trains and transport them across the country for their own safety or for our safety or because we are told to. We're going to put them in there, even though we're hearing some pretty horrific reports about people getting executed in the camps we're sending them to. And then it gets to the point where these people are moving too slowly, getting into our boxcars to go get murdered, so we'll just shoot them in the head here, and everybody will be okay with it. It is a genocidal path to follow orders when they are illegal, immoral, or unethical, and these guys are doing it. And you want to see what it looks like. It looks like two overweight, ready to retire, one who we believe has already retired, FBI agents carrying badges, guns, and representing the authority of the federal government here to just straighten some things out. And his statement about, I'm going to just do a song and dance. Can I come in and do it? One, some of us want to see the song and dance only to laugh at them. This is an incredibly dangerous instinct. Do not open the door to the FBI and let them in your home. What upside could there possibly be? If you are a possible witness and they want a witness statement, get a lawyer. If you are a possible subject of a criminal investigation and they are looking to investigate and interrogate you, get a lawyer. Tell them to go away. If they're not there to serve a warrant that says they are taking a person or things away under the order of a magistrate judge, then there is no reason for you to open that door. I can't say this enough to you. And I'm telling you, this is a genocidal path on purpose because that's what it leads to. And it was obvious to every single guy that you see on this program that used to work at the FBI. We are seeing the I'm just following orders crowd, like these dudes in the video, like Paul, let me pull his name back up here again, like Paul Nixon and David McBride. They're not true believers. Those people are very scary. But most of them don't show up at your house. Why? Because you don't have true believers that are actually implementing this stuff, at least not right now. They are sending senior people with the air of credibility who have an age where they are just trying to get to retirement and they're more dangerous. I'll say that one more time because it's so important. The people that are just following orders to get to retirement are far more dangerous because they've got a lot more on the line than just their job today. What's on the line for them is a lifetime of not having to work after retirement. They're compromised. I said it the other day and people were like, oh my God, like I've never heard that expression. We had a guy that was on my surveillance squad. His name was Ruben. Ruben probably still works for the FBI because he's so useless. We called him a 25-year mistake. He's a really nice man. I don't have any beef with him as a human being. He's just a terrible FBI agent. He's not smart. He's not quick. He can't follow directions and he doesn't do a good job and he has no follow through. He's a perfect federal/government employee. Now, Ruben didn't love the work. He didn't love the camaraderie. He didn't love the squad. He didn't love the authorities. Ruben was in love with the golden eagle taking a crap in his bank account every 2 weeks, so saith the people that worked with him before me. And it was obvious to us. He had the ability to retire. He probably even had close to the money to retire, but he was still worried. He was pinching those pennies trying to figure out, have I saved enough in my thrift savings account that I can actually do this comfortably? So he just kept taking the comfortable out, which was getting paid probably like $175,000 a year. When you max out as a GS-13, that's what you're at. $175K crapped every 2 weeks into your bank account. That's what these guys are going for. Here they are right now.
Hello? Hi. I'm looking for Vanessa Sivage. Okay. Yeah. Who are you? Cassie. I'll make some FBI agent. Okay. This is Mr. McBride. Hey, I'm David McBride. Okay. Nice to meet you, sir. It's going to be a pleasant interaction. You're not in any trouble nor is she. Okay. All right. Hi, how are you? She snuck up on you there. You want to see too? Are we interrupting dinner? I'm really sorry.
That's all right. What's going on?
Let me start at the beginning. So I'm sure you're aware of some of the things that have been going on at your work lately.
With regards to?
Yeah. So I gotta. Can we sit down for a minute? Let me do my song and dance.
That's it. Then it cuts off. Why does it cut off? Because they invited these guys inside. Can I just come inside and do my song and dance? Will you just listen to that? I'm sure you've been aware of some of the things that are going on at your work. That's obviously true. That's a self-evident truth. Why? Because you work there and you're aware of some of the things that are going on at your work. You know who's not aware of what's going on at your work? Those flippin' FBI agents that are standing at your door. They don't know what's going on at your work. They have no idea. That's why they're there, to find it out. And they want to come in there and get you talking. And it's a natural human instinct that a friendly voice with a handshake that reaches out wants to do the thing, accommodate another human being. There is nothing more common than us looking for a similarity in another person and to be friendly. We're socialized to do that. I'm encouraging you. Work. If you have to role play this with your spouse, with your family members that are in the house, role play it. And the answer is do not answer the flipping door with them and let them in your house. And I say that as someone who's really good at doing what that guy did. That guy is a crap salesperson. I would have had that happen much more front. There would have been no standoff between us. That guy was slimy sounding, wasn't he? He's doing his little shuffle. Weird. I always went there with the same and honest instinct, which people can appreciate as well. People know when you're being honest. And my answer was always like this. It's like, if I'm there for a January 6th case, by the way, I offered to my boss, I would go and take every single January 6th interview in the state of New Mexico. I would drive all over the state of New Mexico and do it. And I just said, look, I'm going to go and ask the questions, but let me do it. I'll take them all, every one of them. Because Kyle Seraphin asking you January 6th questions would look like this. Hi, my name is Kyle Seraphin. I'm here from the FBI. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. You have no reason to answer them if you do not feel inclined, and you can certainly tell me that you don't want to talk to me right now. If you don't want to talk to me right now, all you got to do is say that. Would you like to talk to me right now? If you're listening on the audio show, I'm shaking my head over and over again. It's something that my team sergeant used to do when I was in the Air Force. He was like, Seraphin, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Do you want to answer those questions? Do you want to tell me the truth to the questions that I am asking you right now? And you'd be like, oh, Sergeant Parman is telling me not to answer these questions. I will not answer these questions. It's very easy to discredit things. You learn how to do things like this at SEER school, but you can also learn how to do this kind of stuff if you've ever been in sales. And if you also want to sell something with your body language, you just tell people that there's no really good reason for them to talk to you. I've just told you several. Please take that to heart. This is scary stuff. And while they're doing that, because they're basically fighting an uphill battle for credibility, particularly for folks who are willing to do whistleblowing activity on a federal level, for people that are seeing the malfeasance involved in our government, the gangsterism, I'm going to show you this smear job that's going on. We're going to leave the Julie Kelly thing for another day. There is an anatomy of a smear going on there, but it might be a bigger story. So we're going to touch that a little bit later. Let me appreciate my sponsors that continue to allow us to do these programs, and they make a fantastic product. The reason why I endorse and why they got behind me, and I'm very thankful they did, patriotcoolers.com, folks. That's the website, patriotcoolers with an S on the end.com. The promo code is Kyle. I like them because I bought their products long before I ever had a podcast or thought somebody would try to monetize a podcast. I bought Patriot Coolers because I used them when I was on surveillance as an FBI agent. Now, you guys listen to me many ways because of what we did with the FBI, but also because I thought I was going to be an FBI agent. I didn't have this plan. And this is one of the types of products that we used. These things, I would tell you that when you're a surveillance agent and you spend thousands of hours watching bad guys, mostly you're just sitting around. And most of your job might be that too. If you work behind a computer, if you're not working with your hands, the odds are is that you're sitting somewhere where you can have a cup of either hot or cold beverage, whether it's tea or coffee or whether it's ice water or something like that. Iced tea in Texas. Yeah, you're going to want something that keeps it that way, and a Patriot Cooler is a great way to do that. You guys can also customize them with our logos from the Suspendables. Use the promo code Kyle. Again, Kyle. That's how they know we sent you, and you also save 10%, so that's a good deal. It's the same 10% you'd save if you filled out the stuff for being a veteran. You don't even have to give them your veteran information. All you got to do is use promo code Kyle, Kyle. All right. I really am a big fan of these people because they're just such nice folks, and they do support us. You know who are not nice folks? Liars in the media. And that includes on our side. But let's talk about the people that are not on our side today. I'm trying to debate whether we want to do the retraction first or whether we want to do, I guess we'll do the real story. So the story came out a couple of days ago. This was on June 9th. And this is the story. This doesn't actually look like a smear against FBI whistleblowers. It's actually a smear against Jim Jordan, who I've got my differences with. Mostly because Jim Jordan hasn't stepped up in the gap to take care of my buddies. But this was published on June 9th by the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Ohio gerrymandering keeps Jim Jordan safe to grandstand and not legislate. Written by some clown show named Neil Barron. Now, I'm going to show you how they end this article. The wrap up to this piece is a smear on 3 men. All of the allegations in that are absolutely false. They did not fact check this. They didn't actually have an editor confirm. And this is a real problem for people that are off the leash, that do things that are activist type journalism. And this includes people like Julie Kelly. This is one of the issues. She desperately needs an editor. She desperately needs someone to fact check her. Now, I've been told she no longer works for American Greatness specifically because she was so fast and loose with the truth. And I've actually got all the tweets. There's actually like 3 or 4 tweets that I made out. None of those things are actually personal attacks at all. They're just on the facts. It's like, sorry, you got the facts wrong on this one. This is not what you think it is. And that's what she needs. And that's what this guy needs. This guy, Neil Barron. Here are the claims he made. Attacks on Jim Jordan. And he did it by proxy by going after my friends. Several of them, in fact, including Kash Patel. And they're all false. Everything in these paragraphs, the entirety of what you see text on this screen is not true. Jim Jordan made Americans less safe by launching attacks on the FBI. That's false. He had nothing to do with the FBI being safe or not safe. The FBI sucked long before Jim Jordan knew about it. And these attacks undermine trust in the institution. Good. Making it harder to attract and keep qualified employees and preserve and expand intelligence sources. Let me give you a little hint about how hard it is to keep good and qualified employees. They're running off the people that are loyal to the Constitution. That's the FBI's thing. It has nothing to do with Jim Jordan. Now, Jim Jordan claimed dozens and dozens of FBI whistleblowers told his committee that the FBI targeted Republicans to sabotage their elections. Yes, that's true. But that's not exactly what we did. He sort of slanted it. We said that they were basically doing things that were illegal under federal law or they were violations of federal policy. And it turns out that those things also benefited the Democrats. So he's making a little bit of an analytical step there. But that's a true statement. And in fact, only 4 testified. In fact, actually only 3 testified because this guy's a dummy. He thought that Tristan Levitt, who was representing as an attorney from Empower Oversight, was an FBI whistleblower, and he wasn't. He was an attorney. So there you go. Only 4 testified. And Jordan called them credible witnesses because they are, and nobody's been able to refute their claims. In fact, we have the ability to prove that these idiots on the Democrat side of the aisle that went after my friends lied. And some of the people that the FBI sent to cover for them lied under oath. At least 2 of them received money from Trump's close advisor, Kash Patel. Well, that's true. Kash Patel runs a nonprofit charity. Let me tell you about Kash Patel a little bit, folks, because he is really a true friend to the Suspendables. Kash reached out to me, I think through Dan Bongino initially, and I called him up, and I'm standing on a playground in Payson, Arizona, because we didn't have a home at the time, and he said, I want to help you out. And I said, I really appreciate that, but there are people that need the money more than me. Can you find those people? And he said, I raise money for FBI whistleblowers, government employees that are willing to fight against the government gangsters, and I'm writing a book about it right now. And you are one of those people, so I want to give money to you to help you out. And I said, I do really appreciate that. Like, what can I do for you? And he said, nothing. You can't do anything, and you don't have to tell anybody, and I'd rather you not. I want to just send you a check. I want to stroke a check. That was his actual words. I'm ready to stroke checks to people that are in the fight. And they need it because I have the ability to raise money for them and I don't want anything in return. And I said, well, I want to get loud. I want to do more stuff. Let's go on the podcast. Let's go out there and talk to people. I want to do some interviews with you. And he said, of course, all those things are on the table. 100%. I will have you on and we will talk. I still owe him that interview because we haven't gotten to it. We've gotten sidetracked and he's busy. But he said, that is not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is me helping you, and I want to do it, and I don't have to hear it. You don't have to tell anybody I did, and in fact, that's just as good for me. I don't need the publicity. I just want to help you. So he sent me a check, and I said, look, there's some friends of mine that could use it more. He said, anybody that you nominate is someone that I will send money to because I trust your judgment. I know what you're going through. And so I said, you should help out Steve Friend, and you should help out Garrett O'Boyle. And he did those things too. He sent them money when nobody else gave them money. You guys want to support something great? The Kash Foundation is awesome. Fight with Kash. They have cool merch. Also, Kash is just a really good dude. You know, he drinks Coors Light. He's not fancy. He runs around with some people that have big, big money, and I've seen him do that too. But if he's sitting down there and ordering a round of beers, he's just hanging out with regular dudes. He hangs out with the security staff for the famous people sometimes. He's a really humble and normal guy, and he's really funny. In fact, one of the best moments is I was walking to go give my speech with Project Veritas at the America Fest in 2022. And I go walking and I see Kash and he's in one of those iconic custom blazers that he does. It's kind of like loud and wild. And so he goes walking past me, and you know who Kash Patel is when you've seen him a couple times. I'd never met him in person. He goes walking past me, brushes shoulders with me, which I kind of almost intentionally like reached out. And I reached out my hand to shake his hand. And he's probably used to seeing people know who he is, especially at conservative events. So he reaches out and he gives me this kind of like real quick handshake and he just keeps rolling. And I said, hey, Kash, really good to see you. And he gets about 9-10 steps past me, and he stops in his tracks, and he turns, and he goes, Kyle, because we've never met in person. He's never seen my face off a screen. And he goes, hey, man, I'm in a rush. We're going to catch up later. And then we did. So we were on the way back into the hotel later on, and this is just story time, but it's because he's such a good guy. Somebody rides an elevator up. My wife was feeling sick. Turned out she was pregnant at the time. We didn't know that. And she's on her way to the hotel room. We get up to the hotel, and as we're riding the elevator up, these two people who I've never met before, these elderly folks, like elderly couple, and maybe in their 70s, they go, oh, did you see Kash Patel's down there in the hotel bar? And I go, no, but I've been meaning to catch up with him. And they said, you should go down there. So I put my wife into bed, I tuck her in, I run downstairs, and I have a beer with Kash, and he buys me a beer and sits me down and puts me at the table with all of these strangers that are 100% welcoming. That's Kash Patel. All right. And I say that because they're slandering him that he gave them a couple of dollars. Now, they've also tried to claim that the money that we raised for these two guys, Marcus Allen and Garrett O'Boyle, was in fact given by Kash Patel. That's the stupidity of our friend Sheila Jackson Lee. And those kind of lies, I don't know how God does things in the world, but she's got cancer now. So maybe lying for your whole life is not a way to live, and maybe you pay for it. We like to think that there's a sense of justice. I don't know if that's what justice looks like, but, she seems like an evil person. So good riddance. All right. So here's the things. They claim that one found a job, by the way, and that's the job that Steve Friend has. He works for the Center for Renewing America, which is a think tank that Kash used to be associated with, and they hired Steve. In fact, they interviewed both of us. This is kind of a little bit more story than necessary, but it's a holiday, right? So they interviewed both of us, the folks at CRA. And I said, I think that I've got a job lined up. I had actually been offered a position with Project Veritas. You guys don't know that, but I had been. And so I said, I've got a job lined up. Why don't you take care of my friend Steve? And they did. They hired Steve, and they gave him a full salary, and thankfully Steve's been able to support his family. All that because of Kash Patel. I obviously don't work for Project Veritas. They crashed that company, and it's because James O'Keefe is a piece of garbage. But we were offered a job. He offered me a job to my face and then didn't give it to us. And so we were stuck with a pregnant wife living in a house that wasn't ours, trying to figure out what we were going to do. Now, the second part of this article is also very funny because it's full of nothing but lies about George Hill, Garrett O'Boyle, and Marcus Allen. These ugly, nasty slurs. George Hill advocated dismantling the FBI, claiming that it's, quote, better to die than have a domestic intelligence. George Hill never said that. Nobody can find that quote because it doesn't exist. So that's just a false statement. This guy just invented it out of his fever brain because he hated the suspendables. Garrett O'Boyle, another FBI whistleblower, said January 6th was a quote-unquote setup by the Democrats and the FBI. He posted a video of himself at the Capitol sporting body armor, a gas mask, and an AR-15 rifle. This is so objectively stupid and false that they never even thought to check it out. One, he didn't say that. Two, he's never posted that picture. That doesn't exist. So completely made up as the capper to this argument. And third, Marcus Allen was assaulted several Capitol police officers on January 6th and claimed the insurrection was a government scheme. He didn't say that. He wasn't there. And Marcus Allen has never been accused of assaulting anybody. Marcus Allen is an honorable man. You get it? Lies and damn lies. These people are demonic. They had to issue this retraction. There's a picture of Neil Barron. He was born in 1943. So this dude is out there making lies in his 70s. Why? He's a political activist. The Plain Dealer and the Cleveland.com have to apologize to Marcus Allen, Special Agent Garrett O'Boyle, and former supervisor George Hill for the mistakes they made on this gas column. And then they go back and say that none of those things happened. But here's the thing. The lie was done. And this is already in the Internet Archive, so that's why I was able to grab it. It's on my Twitter profile if you guys want to boost this story. This is what government gangsters are like. They lean on this stuff. And so all this stuff goes into the bump stock case. I read an article yesterday that got me riled up, and that's why I'm in this sort of mood right now, talking about governments and gangsters and telling you some backstory about Kash Patel, who wrote a book called Government Gangsters, because this is a big deal, folks. And the Republic is on a slide. And it's on a slide when we have people like Dominic Erdozan, whoever the heck that is. He's a professor of history, a historian apparently, and the author of One Nation Under Guns. He's a gun-hating idiot. He is the person that CNN trots out whenever they want to talk about things about guns that they don't understand because they don't know what they're talking about. And he leads with this. This is the story. When machine guns became available to civilians in the U.S. in the 1920s, the public reaction was swift and emphatic. The presence of such weapon, protested journalist Owen P. White in 1926, was the, quote, paramount example of peacetime barbarism. And the Thompson submachine gun, so light and so deadly, it was the perfect contrivance for the murder of fellow citizens. Nothing emotional about this bullshit story, is there? And there was, he added, something diabolical about the invention, let alone the availability of such an object. So in 1934, the notorious quote-unquote Tommy guns were banned by Congress and automatic gunfire disappeared from America's streets. That's false. Then he goes on to draw this ridiculous claim that a company called Slide Fire Solutions, which introduced the so-called bump stocks, which was just fixed. The decision was just fixed. It sprays like a fire hose. They quoted their marketing manager. We recommend no more than 30 rounds on the belt. Do you guys know that they're talking about a belt-fed weapon now then? A belt-fed AR upper, which are notoriously unreliable, but one person could make it as big as they want. All right. So CNN is all in on the bump stock decision by a Supreme Court is bad. You want to talk about undermining agencies? How about undermining whether or not a decision was legal by not having a constitutional scholar, not having someone who understands how America works? Because as far as I could research, the last time I looked into this guy, he wasn't even born in the U.S. I think he has a British accent. You've got someone who's not American talking about something that is fundamentally American, which is to say the ownership and the private keeping and bearing of arms. What's interesting about 1934 is that the objects were not banned. So for a historian, he has a remarkably bad take on history. What they were done is made out of reach of regular people like you and me. In 1934, the cost of a Thompson submachine gun was approximately $200, which was very expensive. It would be the equivalent of buying a very high-end AR today, roughly in the $2,000 range is what I'm told. And so, I'm sorry, it would have been closer to $4,000. It would have been a very expensive, like $3,300, $3,500. Inflation has changed the game on this. But the last time I looked, it was in the $3,000 plus range, today's money, for $200. So then what did they do? They added a tax stamp on top of it and a series of registries. When they did that, they doubled the price because the tax stamp was $200. Any of you who've gone out and bought a National Firearms Act of 1934 controlled item, whether it be a machine gun, which you can buy and transfer to yourself, whether it be a suppressor, whether it be a short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotgun, the way that the 1934 Act was written, it fixed the dollar amount of the stamp required from the federal government to register at $200. $200. It doubled the price of a Thompson submachine gun. Do you know who could afford a Thompson submachine gun in 1934 at a rough price of like, let's say $7,000 or $8,000 in today's money? The wealthy, the gangsters, and the government. But do we digress here? In 1934, they pulled machine gun ownership away from the basic people that were citizens and civilians in this country, and they gave it to the government and the gangsters. Those are the only people who could afford to have them. This was a classist and many times considered to be a racist decision. The articulation behind it was ridiculous. And the reason why they made it a tax stamp and not an outright ban on a class of weapons is because they knew it was unconstitutional to infringe on the Second Amendment. That Overton window have shifted so dramatically that they are now calling things that are just pieces actual machine guns, like auto sears. It's really, really nefarious work. They use taxation and basically taxation beyond the ability of normal people to pay for it as a proxy for banning. This guy is totally disingenuous in his article. And it made me start thinking about the lies and the government gangsters of the FBI. Now, the FBI lies by just like literally about its birth date and its creation as a federal agency. It just makes it up. This is a little piece from the FBI's archives, by the way. It's called The History of the FBI. It was started in 1908. Well, it wasn't started in 1908 because it was called the Bureau of Investigation. And as I've said and made arguments before, when you talk about the United States Air Force, you look at the birthday they claim, it's in 1947. But the United States Air Force was actually started as the Army Air Corps, right, in World War II. So why don't they celebrate that birthday? Because it wasn't the U.S. Air Force then. And in the same way, the FBI wasn't the FBI until 1935. So why do they claim a birthday in 1908? Because it gives this air of legitimacy, and it gives you some background on the workup that moved in. It changed names multiple times. It was called the Bureau of Investigation. Then it became the Division of Investigation for like 2 years, and then became the Bureau of Investigation, the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1935. But what happened in 1934? On June 18th, yesterday is the anniversary, On June 18th, the FBI got the authority by Congress to carry firearms. And in July of 1934, they killed John Dillinger in the first of many famous shootouts with those 1930s era gangsters. They got the authority to kill people and carry weapons and immediately turned around and killed people. Now, there had been FBI agents that had been killed before. This goes back to the first FBI agent killed in the line of duty in 1925. He wasn't an FBI agent, though, was he? He was a Bureau of Investigation agent. And they carried guns before that. Apparently, Hoover was famous for like taking out a trunk of weapons and just saying, grab one. And it was just a bunch of revolvers and stuff, personally owned weapons. Guys would show up with their own weapons. But they didn't have the legal authority under federal law given by Congress to actually carry them until 1934. And how interesting. The Firearms Act of 1934 also took the type of guns that the FBI was carrying away from the regular people. And the first thing they did with them was kill, a murderer. The John Dillinger gang was not a good guy. He's actually in the thumbnail. You can see him carrying a Thompson submachine gun. But they went out there and began doing this kind of work. So it made me start thinking about how ridiculous this situation has gotten. How far afield have we gotten and why? And so here's my argument to you. Before we jump into the argument, I'm going to suggest to you guys, if you're looking for something on this day, while you're sitting around and you're spending a little bit of money and you're thinking, hey, I could use a good snack. I'm just sitting here munching on crackers or garbage. Instead, you could try madhatjerky.com. Go to madhatjerky.com/Kyle. Use the promo code Kyle for 20% off, and you'll support the program. And you'll also get one of the best cuts of jerky. You can get the USDA Prime. It's like $1 more per bag. I highly recommend that. And if you like a subscription, you can keep that 20% locked in at the delivery rate of your choosing. madhatjerky.com/Kyle. Here we go. Ready? This is where it goes back to. This is Kyle Seraphin's take. What you're seeing up there are the text of the 16th and the relevant text of the 17th Amendment. Okay? This is when we went off the rails. It was before 1934. It was before 18 U.S.C. 3052, which gave the powers of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to carry firearms. It was before all of that. It was initially allowing the 16th Amendment. Congress shall have the power. They changed this. It didn't used to exist. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on income from whatever sources derived without appointment amongst the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. Are you guys hearing what we just did in 1913? We being probably our great grandparents for some of you, my grandparents. They allowed the United States Congress to now lay taxes on incomes. The advent of a federal income tax didn't exist at that time until they passed this constitutional amendment. It used to be through the states. That fundamentally changed the way that power was developed and shared in this country. It took power away from the states. And that wasn't the final death blow that happened right then. And yes, there was the Fed and the Federal Reserve System. But check this out as well. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. We know that, right? That's what the Senate is. Elected by the people thereof for 6 years. That subtle little change changed the nature of the way our constitutional republic worked forever. And it might even be more dangerous than the levying of income tax. The direct election of senators changed Article 1, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution by just a couple little letters. Here's the text, which is sitting right underneath it. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. Same exact language, comma, chosen by the legislature thereof. Do you see what they did? They took the power from the state legislatures, they being us, the people. We approved this. We gave the power of taking our senators and we put them in the hands of the people. We made it more, quote unquote, democratic. The problem is we already had a place where we were represented in the legislative branch. We were represented by the House of Representatives. You direct elect your congressman. Your senator was meant to be appointed by the legislature, which you also elect. It is just one step away from it. What it did is it actually solidified real majorities that could exist in the Senate of the United States. The Senate was supposed to have overwhelming majorities. It was supposed to be the representation of the states. Okay, it was a proxy for state representation. What it did, the Senate, until 1913, was the buffer zone between popular vote and populism and the overwhelming majority of what the states wanted. Imagine this. How many do we see in the state legislatures? How many are red states right now? It's in the 30s, is it not? That is a majority. If you were to double that by the number of senators that came from them, you would see over 60 senators would be Republicans right now if they didn't pass this particular amendment. This 17th Amendment took the power away from the bulk of the country, and it gave it to a populist group, which is why we sit fractionalized, just like the popular vote for president. It breaks down 47, 53. It breaks down 49, 51. We are now at 50-50 with one being the tiebreaker, which is defined by the Constitution. That's the vice president. We gave the power to the people, but we ruined the power of the people to actually be properly represented. The states were supposed to be represented by senators. The state majorities were supposed to be represented so we could have a functional republic. That is the breakdown on why we don't see things work anymore. And that is why Congress started ceding its authorities. It's why it armed these people. It's why in 1946 we got the Administrative Procedures Act, because they couldn't get anything done. So they gave the Administrative Procedures Act of 1946. That was a cop-out that said, you know what? This is not working, folks. We're not able to get any bills through. We're going to give the executive agencies broad latitude to make their own rules about how they're going to do their jobs. We'll give them mandates. We'll pay for it. And they will decide how to do their jobs. And those jobs will then have the force of law, whatever they write up. These administrative laws, or rules rather, have force of law because of the Administrative Procedures Act, which needs to be repealed. And we probably should try to repeal the 17th Amendment. Here's another thing that you probably don't realize. You have not, and doesn't by the actual words of the Constitution, you don't have a right to elect a president. Now, we covered this a long time ago, but I want to touch it again. You have no legal right other than what the states have given you to elect a president. The power to appoint the electors that go and select our president is actually still vested in the state legislatures. In the same way they used to be able to choose the Senate, they would choose a president and a vice president for us. They would send the electors that would make that vote. The president is supposed to be also an executive representation of the state, not the people. And when you democratize it, you have created the factionalism and the tribalism that we currently exist under today. If you don't know where the problem is and how far back it goes, then how on earth are you going to go and try to conserve what is righteous? America Circa like 1912 is apparently where we need to try to roll this back to. And if we are not aggressively and progressively, in the same way that the leftists go, if we are not trying to progress back to where that line belonged, then we are going to always lose. I tell you that I believe the word democracy, particularly by the political left, means tyranny of the majority. And what they did is they codified it. The leftists won. They got this stuff going. The whole concept of we the people means we should be actually represented by multiple layers of representatives. We are not supposed to have direct election of a president, and we certainly aren't supposed to have direct election of the senators for the system to work. When you undermine the system, you screw it up. You see what I'm saying? This system was meant to work like a very, very careful and carefully constructed and well thought out house of cards. And instead, we've started pulling cards and changing the types of cards that they were. How weird is that? You know who was president in 1913? Woodrow Wilson. And he was obviously involved. Was he involved in the... No, he was not. Sorry, I was thinking that he was involved in the Taft administration, but he wasn't. Woodrow Wilson was brought in 13. Woodrow Wilson and FDR, and then the wet dream of what happened for FDR, which happened in 1946. That was under Truman. All of these were continuations of the serious long march through our institutions that have undermined the American experiment and turned it from what should have been a republic into what is actually closer to an actual democracy, the tyranny of the majority. Democracies don't work really well. The reason they don't work well is because if everybody is going to vote and 50 plus 1, all you need to do is sway a few people, and then you are constantly going to be playing ping pong with rules and laws that are going to fight against each other. You can't have long-term American values held in these institutions, and that's what we're dealing with right now. I'm going to tell you another piece that also killed us. This happened in 1984. I just told you, so we've stepped. We went from the 1913s of these two amendments, fundamentally changing the nature of our country, then arming a federal set of gangsters and taking weapons away from the people in 1934 with both a law the National Firearms Act of 1934, and arming the FBI. 1946, the Congress cedes their legal authority under the Administrative Procedures Act to the executive agencies. And then you get what is probably the death blow of our modern republic in this way. In 1984, there was a Supreme Court case known as a landmark case, the Chevron USA Inc. versus the National Resource Defense Council. It's also referred to, the decisions that came out here are called the Chevron deference. And Chevron deference was a legal precedent, a test created by the Supreme Court in the 1980s that said that by default, the court will defer to the agency's answer or interpretation. In other words, sort of the trust the experts. The things that we saw during COVID, those things have a long and sort of storied march. That was a 40-year-old principle by the time it happened. And the Supreme Court has upheld it until recently. What they said was that the experts are the executive agencies. The experts are the ones who run the government. And so the government is going to default to the government's position when in doubt. Not to businesses, not to private citizens, not to the constitutional rights. They're going to default to the executive orders and rules that are pushed out there. And that is a fundamental change. That in 1986, probably the death knell of our civil liberties on the Second Amendment front, at least one of the things we're fighting back most, is the Hughes Amendment, which meant that machine guns could no longer be produced, even at that $200 tax stamp. Because if you could make fresh machine guns today, $200, although it's a bummer, it's a bump in the road for owning a machine gun. The problem is that we can't make new machine guns after 1986 in this country for civilian use. So they completed the work of the 1934 NAFA, or NFA. I know people hate the word NAFA. Look what I'm talking about here. We have gone from trust the people and the people have the authority to now they can be directly taxed by the federal government, the furthest thing away from them. They now have the direct ability to destroy themselves through stupid democracy in the direct election of the Senate, and the government is going to trust the government by default. We are seeing the first shades of this, and the bump stock ruling is actually the first dropping of the cards that this Supreme Court has shown in a 6-3 decision that the law actually matters, the rules actually matter, and they are not going to just do the just trust me bro. The ATF made a rule. The rule was blatantly unconstitutional. It conflated a thing called function of the trigger with rate of fire. Watch yesterday's show if you want to understand what that means. They are not the same thing. One involves the mechanical process. One involves the firing sequence. One involves the rate at which the weapon actually fires. These are not the same thing. And they said it very resoundingly in a 6-3 decision in Cargill versus Garland that we must have the rules written. If Congress wants to pass a law, they got to do their damn job. This should start undoing the Chevron deference, which we think might be coming very soon. And then the second thing it would do is it'll start undermining and put the actual teeth that was supposed to be there. There was a little bit of a roadblock until 1984 in the Administrative Procedures Act. I would love to see that repealed. I would love to see the 16th and the 17th Amendment repealed. If America wants to save itself, it's not going to be Donald Trump. It's going to be saved by the group that is supposed to save America, and that's our legislatures. Article 1. Definitions of the House and the Senate on purpose. They are the primary branch of government. They are where the authorities of the federal government are supposed to be done. And then the people who execute those decisions are called the executive. The president has to be moved into a back seat. Stop trying to elect a king, Americans. We had a king. We overthrew it twice on purpose. Kings are not a good look for Americans and for free men. That's why I'm talking about all this stuff. I know it's a little bit pedantic, and it also is a story that is not very sexy because it's talking about history lessons. But if we don't know our history, forget doomed to repeat it. We don't even know where to start fixing the problem. If you think about any time you've gone after an electrical problem, if you've gone after a plumbing problem, let's get real practical, blue collar type skills. When there is a leak, you have to trace back and find where the leak was. It's not because your sink is not getting water pressure anymore. It's because the water went somewhere else. When did that start? You trace the line up. And if we trace the line up, you're going to get down to like 1913. At the very minimum, that is a place to start. And we could fix a lot of these things. We have to truly understand what it is that has gone awry if we want to go back to the fork in the road where we took the wrong turn. And that is definitely one of them. I'm going to show you guys an article. I'm going to encourage you guys to go to Substack and follow my friend, James Erdman. He is a former CIA officer. He is an absolute stud. He was a Ranger Battalion infantryman. He speaks multiple languages, including Arabic and Chinese. He's the kind of guy that you thought the CIA had working for them. He's a patriot. He's a lover of America. And he's really a really cool, smart, interesting person. He writes a Substack called Liberty Lad. You can find him at jameserdman.substack.com if you want. He wrote an article yesterday that he sent me. Mostly it's self-aggrandizing for me because he's very, very kind to what he says about me. But I forget when I tell people things sometimes. I make impacts on people's thoughts, and I don't mean to. And so I want to share this because he reminded me that I have this principle and I believe in it. It's why we do the podcast the way we do. This article is entitled, "They Are Missing the Point. It's by Design." Not Senator Ron Paul, though. He gets it. So he's talking about some of the COVID origins. Jim was one of the guys that actually brought to the attention of our members of Congress what's up with COVID. He was on a team that did investigations into money laundering and so on. You guys can read his backstory. He's a very smart and interesting guy. Like I said, multiple languages, multiple deployments into multiple third world shitholes, to quote Donald Trump. He spent a lot of time in bad places for this country on purpose, because he believes in it. And one of the things he said here, he said, "I'm one of the many government bureaucrats who desperately want accountability, and to steal a term from my friend and recovering FBI special agent Kyle Seraphin, we need radical transparency." That's a lot about what this podcast does. He said, "Kyle's another guy who figured it out long before most, and he got it well before I figured out, and I like to think I'm on the far right side of the bell curve." Jim is on the far right side of the bell curve. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And to speak with him is to learn things, even if you didn't mean to. What he says here about me, which I think is very flattering, but it's also what we should be trying to do as an example, and I need to do it as better. If people think that I'm doing this, then I need to do it even more. He said, "Kyle righteously pushes the limits and forces people to face the truth head on. He makes people uncomfortable, and he does it with a smile." This is like one of our 5-star reviews, right? He reminds me and us that bold leadership is the only thing that can punch through the typical mediocre malaise displayed by government employees desperate to avoid disrupting their bi-weekly salary. We need more Kyles. We need more Senator Rand Pauls. He goes on and talks a little bit more about it if you guys want to do this. He said if I was his direct report, he probably would have had brain damage from hyperventilation. I did make my supervisors uncomfortable wherever I worked. Do you see the government gangsterism? The only way we get through this is actually through radical transparency. And I really appreciate Jim bringing that back to my attention. I don't know why God works the way that he does, but this is not something that was on my radar to deal with it. He even mentions that biweekly salary, that golden eagle crapping in your bank account. And it's timely, because we've got that great evidence of FBI agents doing a song and dance at somebody's door to go and jam them up on charges that are garbage, that they don't even believe in. They don't because they can't, because they actually remember when the FBI had some degree of honor, or at least it represented itself as though it did. The purpose of people signing up was to serve. And if you served honorably, it meant that you were willing to lose your job over the right reasons. If they told you to do something illegal, immoral, or unethical, I was literally trained at the Holocaust Museum. And yes, you guys get all upset about it because the the Anti-Defamation League is the one that co-sponsors it. It's great training. If you've never been to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., I don't like going to Washington, D.C., but if you're there, go to the museum and ask them for the law enforcement program. Tell them that you're either associated with law enforcement, whatever you have to tell them. I don't care. They're not a government agency. You can lie to them. Go find out what it means and how the Holocaust gets accomplished. These things are constantly brought up as themes in my life over and over again. I actually do credit it to the Holy Spirit because I don't actually have these thoughts. I don't walk around and go like, aha, how will I link this to this thing? I just open my mind up and I think what is happening, and these things happen also outside of my ability to influence it. This is providential to me. So go read Jim's Substack. Like I said, jameserdman.substack.com. Liberty Lad. I get it emailed. He doesn't write them every single day, but he is telling something that is important. This radical transparency means we've got to do things that are uncomfortable. And that sometimes means calling out our own side, because our side is not perfectly righteous. And we need to own those things. When I'm wrong, I want to be told. And I want to eat that crow. I will eat it in front of you. I don't know everything. I know some things, and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm inspired to be right. That's why this podcast opens up with the statement that it does, that we are interested in the uncomfortable truth. We are not interested in comforting lies. Radical transparency means sometimes you're going to hit yourself when you try to swing the hammer of truth. So be it. But the other problem is that when we swing it and we hit people, we don't do it because we want to hurt them. We do it because we care about the outcome, which is to move them towards the truth. I'd rather hit them like a crochet ball. What do you call that? What is that stupid game? Croquet, not crochet. I want to hit them like a croquet ball. I want to tap them and make them move in the right direction. I don't want to tap them and just hurt them. That's irrelevant. And I went back and reviewed all my tweets at Julie Kelly because this ongoing stupidity is really frustrating to me. And it's actually caused me I think it probably caused me to get sick when I was gone for those couple days. It weighs on me heavily when people are out there saying things that are false and they are attacking us. Because they're attacking not just me, they're attacking my family and our credibility and what we've done with our time, right? And so I went back and read everything that I wrote to her that got her all set off. And all of it was dispassionate, fact-based, non-personal attacks, simply calling out the simple truth of what was true. And they are objectively accurate, the tweets that I have. And they are backed by 1 million law enforcement officers in this country. But when you have a loose relationship with the truth and you don't have an editor, like apparently the Chicago Plain Dealer doesn't have an editor for their guest columns, or Julie Kelly doesn't have one by herself, and she got kicked out of the place where they were regulating it. Her better work was always older. By the way, I corroborated some of her work previously, and it was at American Greatness, and it was quite good because there's an editor there. We all need someone to step into our life and be a sounding board of sanity. And I have the Suspendables and my wife, and you have your friends and your brain trust. We all have to be part of this thing. We all have to approximate truth. Let me share some weird stuff because it's Weird Wednesday, and we'll wrap up. And I have a very fun palate cleanser for you that I think you guys will. It's both silly and amusing, and it'll also stick in your head. So I hope you guys will stick around for that too. All right, here we go. A couple things. One of my FBI buddies sent me this. This is just quite funny. Listen, they are being turned on their heads. The evil is being exposed regularly. Here's a good one. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police is surprised that hate groups are increasingly racially diverse. This is coming from a reporting group that's known as True North. They're a Canadian news source. True North is tnc.news if you got to read it. This is really funny. They're just really shocked that these Canadian hate groups have radicalized people that are ethnically diverse. And they define a hate group as an organization or a collection of individuals, quote, whose goals and activities attack or vilify an entire group of people on a basis of color, race, religion, national or ethnic origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or mental or physical disability. And these hate groups apparently have everybody that's not in that group. I don't know. There's just nothing funnier than saying that the diversity is actually the strength of the hate groups. Can we just laugh about that? I'm actually going to do a little bit more tomorrow talking about the recent conviction. It's actually a pleading guilty of the Club Q shooter in Colorado, who claimed to be non-binary and sexually abused and had all these problems, and just got another 150 years and life sentences added on to his sentence in federal court. They are federal hate crimes. The judge is a complete lunatic, saying that you attack their safe space and other bullshit that we're seeing, gender ideology and lunatics. This is our federal court system. It's very funny when these guys have to admit, and these guys being the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they have to admit that the diversity is the strength of the hate groups, because everybody just hates the people that suck. That's all. Last thing I want to share with you, because I do think it is an indication of how things go and slip when you start losing principles. This is one of those little silent reminders of how stupid and dangerous the time that we are in. Dripping Springs is going cashless. They will not accept cash at the visitor center. You're like, Kyle, what the heck is that? Dripping Springs is a walking trail, and it is Bureau of Land Management, BLM, the real BLM, run by the Department of the Interior. You know, federal park rangers have authorities there, and FBI agents have authority there too. It is federal land that was right around the corner from my old house when I lived in Las Cruces. And for some reason, I felt like I should show you guys what it is we gave up by being Suspendables. My family used to have that as our front yard. And if you can't see, you can come to like the hour and 3 minute mark on the show. You can see that was my front yard. We looked out over nothing but desert and a very sparsely populated area. And we looked over those mountains, which were in my backyard. I actually have a picture of the backyard too. But those were my mountains. I used to look at them every day. If I barbecued, I used to be able to sit out there with my kids while they were playing in the yard. And those mountains in the Dripping Spring recreation area, now they will not accept cash. You know, the thing that you have in your pocket that says it's legal tender for all debts, public and private. It's issued by our federal government through the Treasury, and it should be accepted by the flippin' federal government. Should it not be? Are we really going to have a cashless Department of Interior space? I don't get it. They're going to go credit card only now. They're going to run it on an app. This is unacceptable, people. This is that quiet march away from what we are supposed to do when we don't even acknowledge that our money is better money than a credit card system. And am I guilty of using credit cards? Of course. I'm like everyone else. It's way more convenient. And of course, you have to buy them online and so on. But I'm going to encourage you, and I'm going to try to do the same. I'm going to try to use cash more frequently. And it's a pain in the butt because it means I have to go and drive out and go pick up cash from a bank that is mine. If you can do it, let's start pushing back and making cash. Somebody recommended just make it one day a week. Pick a day of the week that you want. Yeah. C. Parker in the chat is saying that people can't count back change. Well, make them count it. We only hold them to account when we do it this way. All right, so I've got a palate cleanser first, 5-star review. I'll read you another 5-star review. It seems like Jim Erdman did a good one here, but here's one that's very nice as well. I got to be able to read this. Hold on. This is coming from Kale Ard99 may have seen one of these already. This is the most informative show out there, 5 stars. Well, that's high praise. Here we go. Kyle does an amazing job of keeping things interesting yet informative. He always covers topics and issues not covered by other podcasters. He's a glimpse into the inner workings and the corruption happening in our government at the moment. It's never a dull show. Highly recommend to anyone. I hope we lived up to that today. I think we may have. So I appreciate this. If you guys found something that you did not previously know in today's show, and obviously it's a cursory touch, I'm not giving you all the civics, share it. Share a clip if you want. I don't care. Cut it and use it. Send it around. When you guys do that, I find it very flattering. And some people want to do it. The other thing is you can simply just send the link, whether it's to the audio podcast on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, on Apple. We really appreciate you guys sharing it. That is how we grow. And lastly, I'm going to give you this fun palate cleanser. This is a video that I ripped from something called Humorous Animations. They are my favorite Instagram account. I hate Instagram, but this is hilarious. So listen closely. It goes very quickly. You're going to learn some new words for things that you already know. And you're also going to say, man, I wish I had an interview like this. You'd want to be on the receiving end of this interview, not the one who's actually being interviewed, because you would walk away cracking up. Here we go.
Good morning. Have a seat, please. Let me just say.
Oh, let me just say that you're not going to be able to read the caption if you're listening on the audio. So I'm coming right back to it. But this says, an interview with the inventor of the walkie-talkie. This is their little fantasy show. Here we go.
Good morning. Have a seat, please. Let me just say, dude, your resume here is weak. But let me get this straight. You invented walkie-talkies?
I did.
Huh. And you came up with that name all by yourself?
I did, yes.
Wow. Clever guy, huh? What do you say we forget about this interview? And you and I just play a little game. If you win, the job's yours. All right, here's how we're going to play. I am going to splurt out a series of random words. If you can give me better names for these words on the spot, zero hesitation, you win. Sound easy enough?
Yes, it does.
Shall we begin?
We shall.
Bumblebee.
Fuzzy buzzy.
Hippopotamus.
Floaty bloaty.
Parrot.
Wordy birdie.
Fork.
Stabby grabby.
Spoon.
Soupy scoopy.
Underwear.
Peeky cheeky.
Bra.
Breasty nesty.
Pregnancy test.
Maybe baby.
Stamp.
Licky sticky.
Wig.
Hairy wary.
Defibrillator.
Hardy starty.
Nightmare.
Screamy dreamy.
Okay, lightning round. I'm going to give you 3 in a row. You give me 3 in a row back, you're hired. You ready?
Yep.
Seat warmer, socks, microwave.
Seedy heedy. Feedy heedy. Heedy eedy.
Welcome to the company.
Your office is actually...
I don't know why I like that so much. And so many of you guys also fell into the same one that I think. Maybe Baby is my favorite name. Why is someone not selling a pregnancy test called Maybe Baby? God, that's really good. Hardy Starty is also really clever. They're all really, really, really smart. Whoever writes this stuff is really good. I love seeing that there are brilliant people still out there, and that also gives me a little bit of hope in America because they are brilliant enough to write comedy like that. That means they're also smart enough to see where the problems are. Hope you guys saw the problems today. I hope that you are willing to share it with your friends, and we do appreciate that. Support our sponsors. They're always in the show description, and join us on rumble.com whenever you can, live at 0930 Eastern Time, 8:30 here in Texas, America. That's the live chat still going. You guys can see it streaming past. That's what you're missing out on. If you're watching us on anywhere else, you're not going to be able to that. And I actually get to see what you guys are writing too, because it's on my screen too. So I appreciate all of you for being here. We look forward to another great day on Thursday. I hope you guys are safe and you enjoy this Juneteenth without getting shot at or doing something stupid. If you got a day off, live it, hang out with your kids, and we will catch you again tomorrow. God bless you. See you then.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.